You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week we're joined by Dr. Patricia Wright and Katie Curran from Proof Positive, a national nonprofit focused on advancing positive psychology and well-being for autistic individuals. Dr. Wright, a global leader in autism advocacy, and Katie, an expert in resilience training and positive psychology, share how their organization integrates happiness science with autism services to promote more meaningful, joyful lives for autistic individuals and their communities. Welcome to the podcast, Patricia Wright and Katie Curran.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We are so excited to be here. We appreciate every opportunity to spread the word about well-being and what it can do in support of the autism community.
Well, I'd love to start just because we're going to get into positive psychology. We're going to get into all the wonderful work you're doing, but we all got into this field for a reason, and it's typically, there's a personal reason or an exploratory reason. But maybe we can start with you, Patricia, and you can give us a little bit of a background of how you fell into the field of neurodiversity and autism in general.
Yeah, you bet. So I've had the privilege of working in autism services and supports for a little more than 40 years. And it is all because of one person. Her name is Sherry. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher since I was 12. And then I met Sherry and I was a respite provider for her. She was 8 and she was on the spectrum and had some other co-occurring disabilities. And I met Sherry and never looked back. It was just this, I think she was an amazing human. She passed a few years ago, but she was just this amazing human. And so I started as a respite provider and then did go on to become a special educator and have worked in other sectors for my career. But it was one human, and that human was Sherry.
And that's, a lot of us start for that same story. We have that personal connection. And I love the way that you were discussing Sherry as being an amazing person, as an amazing human, because oftentimes we get stuck at looking at a label and saying, well, they're an amazing autistic individual, but it sounds like she has so many different labels that she could have worn throughout her life.
Oh, yeah.
And this person is this whole being, and you saw that in her.
Absolutely. Vibrant, awesome. Spitfire, opinionated, kind of everything I love in people and everything I love in women. So Spitfire, all sorts of those things, even at 8.
That's awesome. And Katie, how did you find the field of autism?
I can sound a bit like a parrot to Patricia's story when I share mine, but very similar. I took a summer job my freshman year in college to work in an ESY program for kids on the spectrum. Had never heard the word autism, but $8.25 an hour for a summer gig back then, 25 years ago, sounded pretty good. And then I met Noah. And Noah is the kid who hooked me. He was just this incredibly brilliant young man who in a lot of ways just captivated me. And so I ended up just sort of transferring schools, making sure I could continue working. I was in the Baltimore area at that point. So he was a student at Shepherd Pratt. And then I sort of went on to work at Kennedy Krieger and move up to Jersey and work in some programs in New Jersey and just could never walk away. And 25 years later, I've had many, many captivating students and many awesome experiences, but Noah is who got my heart and my mind into this space.
Well, and maybe we can get a little bit of a background as well on what positive psychology is, because it sounds like all of us got into the field from these really strong connections, but the field was different back then. Is that I don't know that there was as much of an influence on positive psychology as there much as being able to really focus on getting somebody the skills and pushing hard to build a repertoire. And positive psychology might not have been the talking points. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background on that too, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I started in autism services, pos psych was not a topic of conversation. I think I worked in the field many, many years before I even heard the word well-being, or there was any sort of focus on talking about happiness indices was sort of the beginnings of that. But about 10 years into my work, I realized that you're exactly right, Jeffrey, so good at building skills. We were not building meaningful, joyful lives. So I actually took a summer off. I went to Tanzania. There was a nonprofit trying to start a school for kids with autism in Moshi, which is a village that sits at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. And I thought this seems really fun and a sort of cool way to explore the world. And I was shocked. So I landed in Tanzania expecting to see sort of the worst behaviors I'd ever seen, the least skill development I'd ever seen, all of the sort of worst of. And instead, I was met with a community that had no idea how to intervene. So they were just celebrating the strengths of the kids in their school and their community. And that set me on this path to sort of understand how we could create communities of meaning, of joy in a similar way, and that there must be a balance between sort of skill building and prioritizing well-being. And so in my sort of Google searches when I got home, I found positive psychology, and it was actually only about 3 years into the field. Martin Seligman is the founder. He's at the University of Pennsylvania, a brilliant psychologist. And after 30 years of studying human sort of suffering, he had shifted focus to say, hey, what's right with the human condition? How do we identify, name, and study what is going right with humans? How do we not only help people get from -10 to 0, but how do we take people from 0 to +10? How do we get to thriving, flourishing? And he was committed to launching a field of study that was as rigorous as clinical psychology, but applied to the best of the human condition. And so I was fortunate enough to be accepted into his graduate program and study alongside him, and then work alongside him for the next 5 or 6 years, implementing in schools and with government officials and the US military, before turning back to my roots and going, all right, let's see what we can do with getting pause psych into the autism community, another place where outcomes just aren't where we want them. And can we bring the science of happiness to the table and shift some of that?
It's funny that we go thousands of miles away to come back to our roots to really understand, hold on, what's really important? And then how do I take that and bring it back to what I was doing? And Patricia, maybe you can give us, because these shouldn't be mutually exclusive. Autism services, positive psychology, happiness, these shouldn't be set apart. So where is that connection, and where do those two things come together so that we can make sure that we're focused on the right things as we're servicing those who are looking for empowerment and support?
Jimmy, I think I'm going to answer that a little bit, and then I'm going to pass it back to Katie, because that has been her life work over the last couple decades. But from someone who may not have had the opportunity to think about those intersections, I think, and this is something that Katie has kind of taught me, and I can look back reflectively on my work, is I think we spent a lot of time as autism support professionals, educators, all of those things, even provided, parent support, things like that, of like, when you learn this, you'll become happy. When you get these skills, you'll become happy. When you do these things, your life will be better. And certainly some of those things are absolutely true, right? We develop communication skills, we develop some of those things make your life more enriched and all of those things. But it's just like all of us. And if you just kind of apply that to yourself, and Katie can talk about this specifically, but kind of the hedonic treadmill, we can apply that same thing to ourselves, right? Like, when I get the bigger house, I'm happy. When I get this much money in my bank account, I'm happy. When I get married, I'm happy. It's like, no, just no, right? Like the answer is no. It's like happiness is a skill in itself. Well-being is a skill in itself. We're able to do these things. And then even more so, and Katie, I'm going to ask you to take this from here, is even more so is once you actually have well-being, I can develop all those skills. Like, I struggle to exercise. When I feel better, it's a whole lot easier for me to get out of bed and get down on that treadmill, right? So just from a personal perspective, and if you think about that, we all know this in autism intervention. When people are regulated and happy and have well-being, it's like, hey, want to learn something a little hard? And they're like, well, I can lean into that a little bit, right? So I can think about that from my own skills. Like when I'm presenting something new to an autistic learner, I definitely wanted their well-being to be, and I knew that instinctively, but I did not have the language with it that I do now, thinking about positive psychology and integrating that. So, and Katie, I would love for you to talk, a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Patricia, what you're saying so sort of instinctually, and you, many good educators, and certainly parents know this, that it's not when I get this thing, I will be happy. It's if I can find happiness, everything else gets easier. So, um, you know, some of the more concrete stories that I can share is like students who were just really struggling. They were in programs like many of our students. Once they get diagnosed, once they have an IEP, the vast majority of their day is spent focused on their deficits. That is the nature of the IEP process, that we are going to shore up those weaknesses. Yes, we note their strengths in the narrative, but we don't spend a whole lot of time on IEP goals focused on strengths and advancing their areas of passion and interest and natural engagement. We're trying to fix their deficits and shore those up. And for good reason, we need to do all of that, right? But at the same time, if you ask a neurotypical kid to spend 80, 90% of their day in the subject they like the least, they too are miserable, right? Mm. So when we start flipping it on its head and we say, like, what if happiness is prioritized as importantly as these other skills? What I have seen happen is everything from your daily living skills to your academic skills to your self-help skills get easier to teach. So I tell teachers, I tell behaviorists, I tell anyone who's working with a kid on the spectrum, your first job in every single interaction is to inspire joy. Why? Because joy will help that student learn. Joy will help that student make progress. We know this is the research of Barb Fredrickson. Some of our favorite research comes out of a lab at UNC. Barb Fredrickson was the pos psych researcher who asked the question, what good are positive emotions? Why do we feel joy? We know we feel fear, anxiety, stress to help us survive, fight or flight. But up until about 20 years ago, no one had asked the question or studied, why do we feel joy? So Jeffrey, I'll throw that one at you. Why do we feel joy, love, serenity? I know you usually ask the questions on the podcast, but take a stab at it. Like, why do you think we as humans feel positive emotions?
I would imagine is that it provides fulfillment, it provides purpose, it provides value to what's occurring, and it creates relationships. That's kind of the way that I would figure it, but I, once again, haven't studied it the way you have. And I'd love to hear kind of a little bit more as far as the background, because I see happiness sometimes as a construct as well. That's so hard to be able to kind of get to the specifics. And maybe you have some guidance on that.
Yeah. So every middle schooler and high schooler will learn the term fight or flight. They know how to label the benefit of feeling negative emotion. Barb's work shows us there is a similar phenomenon that happens with positive emotions. It's called broaden and build. Positive emotions, quite literally, open up our minds. So Jeffrey, you're right. It's in the moments that we're feeling good that our vision expands, our brains open. We problem solve faster. We come up with more creative solutions. We are able to connect. We see through diversity and are more likely to see similarities with us and other people, promoting connection. So it's in the moments of joy, of inspiration, of love, that we actually build the resources we need to be resilient in those tough moments, which is really, really cool. So the broaden and build theory says that positive emotions open our brains and they actually protect our hearts. They slow our heart rates down. They reduce cortisol levels. They reduce stress. And we know stress is through the roof. Parents, people with autism alike report really high levels of stress. So it's like, can we teach skills? One of our favorite skills to teach is jolts of joy, where we teach people to make a list of just quick triggers for positive emotions. What are the quick 3 to 5 minute strategies you have in your tool belt that will be a jolt of joy for yourself, your students, a colleague, a family member, and try to practice 3, 4, 5 of those a day, especially you're walking into a tense meeting, jolt of joy, you want your brain open. You're trying to teach a student a brand new skill or something they've been struggling with. start with a jolt of joy. Their brain is open, they're leaning in, you're much more likely to make progress. So that's some pretty cool science I could talk all day about, but
well, I mean, it is, and you should talk all day about it, because and maybe we can talk a little bit about the global impact of this, but I feel like I can go into a variety of clinics right now, and I see, I see therapists working with children, and they're so focused on drills. They're so focused on sitting there and doing the skill-based components that they forget that this is a person first. And if I don't have that child wanting to be a part of the environment, wanting to explore the ideas with me, feeling good and successful about themselves and proud, is that I'm not going to make any of those successes. So when you both have been overseas, if I'm correct, and taken a look at the global impact, but in nations that maybe didn't or don't have the amount of resources to do the technical work that we associate with applied behavior analysis, do you see more of the focus on the happiness and on the joy of life? And how do you take those principles and say, how do I take the best of both worlds to be able to really create the environment for somebody to thrive? And maybe we'll start with Katie again, and then we'll go back to Patricia.
I'm going to hand it back to Patricia because, she can talk so clearly on this. But the one thing I will say is I think you're right. It's at the intersection. So it's like there's a huge piece of me that believes that the data that we need to show progress often impedes on the progress itself because it becomes a barrier to connection. So it's helping particularly sort of younger, newer professionals understand how to connect first and collect the data second. And then also it's like, what are we collecting data on? So Patricia knows this. Like if you're carrying a clipboard or an iPad and you're taking data on anything, are you also taking data on level of engagement? Do we know that they actually want to be sort of leaning in, doing what they're doing? Could you make the activity more engaging by drawing on a strength? Are you taking data on smiles? Are you taking data on laughter? Are you taking data on, sort of happiness indices? We get what we measure. So are we measuring what matters most? And so I encourage us to sort of think about the intersection of like, can we just get people focused on well-being in a similar way that we're focused on some of these other skills that are also important? Trust me, I believe that too, but can we do it in a way that promotes connection and joy and engagement? Patricia.
I also think that the obvious question also is always how. Right? Like, I think that that's a really reasonable question. I think most of us, when we're looking at the individuals who are providing instruction in the way you described, it's because they've been systematically taught how to do that. And I think that was part of the commitment that, Katie, when she kind of initiated Proof Positive, and we were saying like the question when we're saying, gosh, prioritize well-being, the obvious question is, how do I do that? And I think that's why we feel fortunate we have open source content on skills like the Jolt of Joy and many others on how do you systematically provide instruction on these skills and the importance of teaching these skills. Like it's not just an experience that someone has, right? It's like something that's systematically taught. A gratitude practice is amazing as long as it's a practice, right? So gratitude is effective if you're practicing it. It doesn't just, it doesn't just miraculously happen to you. And so when we think about related to the autism community, our website is full of these resources, tools, the how, the lesson planning, the resources, the materials, all open source. So, at no cost to communities and families to be able to provide instructions, Jolt of Joy, Positivity Portfolio, all these, what went well, which is a gratitude practice. I think for me, that I want to make sure that people know that it's not just it's not just an idea. There is a practical application and systematic work that needs to happen. We're good at the systematic, and now you have access to how to do this and how to promote well-being in our instruction.
I love that.
Well, and I'd like to make it one level sort of more specific for the folks listening. Many of you probably have students or the kids living in your home have some sort of activity schedule in their life. So every student, I maintain a small private practice on the side because I am so interested in how we actually bring these skills to life for students. And I don't think we can do that in a vacuum or by just sitting in a room talking. So I'm constantly continuing to interact with students one-on-one and coaching small teams. And so things like, hey, do your students already have a health and well-being check-in where they're clipping their nails, combing their hair, shaving their face? I, of course, call it a health and well-being check-in because every single day, all of my students in the same schedule where they're checking their personal appearance and combing their hair have a place where they can choose to meditate, have a place where they practice gratitude, and have a place where they actually do what we call a Perma Plus snapshot. And we haven't talked yet today about Perma Plus, but when you talk about happiness as a construct, Jeffrey, that you can't really necessarily like hang on to, you're not alone. So Martin Seligman, who's the founder of the field, 30 years later describes happiness actually as the 6 elements critical to human thriving and flourishing. And so those are Perma Plus. Positive emotions, that you have a healthy dose of feeling good day in and day out. Engagement, that you spend time on things that captivate you, allow you to find flow and sort of rejuvenate. Relationships, that you have strong connections to people that will support you, that will celebrate you when things go well. Mattering, that you have a sense that you sort of belong to something larger than yourself. And this is a place in our field where it's like, we have so much room to grow. Are your students out volunteering in their local park, learning about climate change? Are they volunteering at there's so many ways that our kids just love to sort of be helpful. Can we build this sense of mattering in and get them a part of a community? Accomplishment, that we have a set of goals that we feel really hopeful and optimistic about achieving them. Another place as a field we can do better. How many of us have kids that sit in front of us and don't even know the goals they're working towards? Because we've written the IEP behind their back or designed their treatment goals and written them on a clipboard, but they don't even know what they're trying to achieve. So, right. So can we get them involved in the goal setting, goal achievement process? And then the pluses for all things health, sleep, nutrition, movement. Are you physically healthy? And so when we think about happiness, it's really actually about PERMA. So all of my students have an opportunity to meditate every day. They have an opportunity to practice gratitude every day, a skill called What Went Well, where they just answer the question about what went well that day. And some do it with pictures if they have less language, and some do it in journal form. And then they have a place to actually measure their well-being, Perma Plus snapshot, where they are scoring on a scale 0 to 10 how they're doing on each of those elements, which gives their teachers feedback too, like, hey man, I was not very engaged today, or my relationship score is low. Let's make sure we get some peer time in tomorrow. Let's make sure so you can take Perma Plus snapshot, available on our website. There's all sorts of resources to help teach it and get some real good feedback from students.
Everything that you just went through, there's so much value in that, not just working with children who are neurodiverse, but in everyone's life. It's just something that we all should be doing. But what kind of is always the hardest thing to be able to do is I look at a lot of the programs that our clinicians are coming through, and these aren't the things that are being focused on in those programs always. So whether it's some of the new technologies that have been, I don't even know that they're new technologies, new frameworks that are coming out, like assent-based care or neurodiversity affirming care or positive psychology, which once again isn't new, but these are things that a lot of the clinicians are not exposed to enough to understand how to integrate it into their practice. And I guess this goes to a question on, you all are leaders within your fields, and how do we start to push this in so that our clinicians have the skill sets so they're not coming into the job and doing what we just described as maybe not the best level of care, where we're forgetting about the happiness of the child through the process. And Patricia, maybe we can start with you as far as a leader. How do we start pushing this?
I think I always think top down, bottom up. There we go. Put those together. So I think about one thing. I think, Jeffrey, that we're not happy with the outcomes. So I think that's one of the reasons it's happening. We now have data from years, and we're talking about how autistic individuals are lonely. Autistic adults aren't. Their employment rates are not what we want them to. Underemployed, unemployed. So we're having some of that data. We love database decisions. And so if we have outcome data that we're not happy about, we probably should change things. And And I speak as someone who's contributed to that data, so I say that personally. So when I think, like, and you mentioned a few things, compassion, assent-based, neuroaffirming, all of those, these are great movements, right? And then again, the question is how, right? I don't think anyone's going to say, I think we should not practice with compassion. What they're asking for is, how do I do that when I can go over and pull off the shelf my like systematic instruction around things, but I don't have the systematic instruction. So I think our field is building towards those things. And certainly that's the work of Proof Positive as well, is building towards those things. And that's the bottom up, right? And I think about, we also can practice that as a staff. Like, when's the last time a staff meeting started with what went well versus where's the tragedy? So I think that we can also demonstrate those skills interpersonally and all of those things. That's kind of this bottom up, right? Like, let's start developing resources, let's developing information. And then we have the top down, right? So, improving our professional standards, requiring professional development standards. We've seen PD standards change. That's in our own kind of field of behavior analysis, field of special education. From the very top is our policy changes, right? So Katie alluded to this. We have a deficit-based model. The way we receive funding, be it medical insurance or education, is through deficit-based. We have to have conversation about being a truly strength-based group. So we have systems of care that do this. We as a field have to take the systems of care that is, start pushing to change them through legislation, through advocacy, through lobbying, all of those things. And we have to start modeling what strength-based really looks like. Katie's example of a high school student that is, really great at math and really struggles at music. If you put them in 5 periods of music, what do you think they'd look like? And that's what we do to individuals on the spectrum versus, gosh, they're really good at they're really good at math. And so let's teach them communication and social skills using maths, and let's just teach them math. Like, that would be amazing.
And Katie, I mean, so we've talked about, and maybe it's the gatekeeping that occurs with the insurance companies as well, as far as, if you're not making specific amount of progress, is that now you're having to go a level of demonstration and proving that the child could still benefit from care. And I think that there's been a small shift to quality of life being a measure. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that those making the decisions on who's paying for care and
hang on though, Jeffrey. Wait, because they're going to make more progress. This is the part too. It's like, I also want them to learn how to use the toilet and have communication in front. Like, these are skills that actually increase learning, and we have that demonstrated across different categories. So I think sometimes it's not either or. It's not focusing on well-being results in little less learning. It's that focusing on well-being actually increases that learning trajectory.
Do you think, though, that it shapes the clinician, though? And that's I guess what I was getting to, is that you have clinicians now that are so focused on being able to demonstrate small progress. So they're choosing targets and goals that are not necessarily the most beneficial ones for that client. Mm-hmm. And it's being shaped by not the behavioral health industry or shaped by those of the advocates of the autism world, but being shaped by funding stream to say, these are the goals that you need to do in order to keep the service going. And I guess that's the question that kind of hit my head immediately. And Katie, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly Patricia's area of expertise over mine, but I think this is represented by sort of our larger healthcare structure, right? We can move out of the autism space and just talk about, we don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a sick care system. We wait until people get sick and we treat sickness. And so it's not surprising that autism intervention, now that we've got insurance in the mix, is moving in this direction of, sort of treating rather than enhancing lives and meaningful. And what do we really want to be funding? And so when we look overseas to a place like the UK, who measures gross national well-being right next to GDP, and that is part of their policy decision making. And there are many other countries, it's not the UK alone, but they were one of the first to start getting a read on what is our gross national well-being? How does that sort of influence policy decision? That's a whole different conversation in healthcare. And so I hope at sort of an even higher level than just our field, we as a country start moving in a direction of actually promoting health, not waiting for people to get sick and suffer. And so we talk about quality of life and well-being measures. And there's some new research coming out around sort of health span versus lifespan. Yes, we're extending the human lifespan, but we actually are seeing the health span of humans get shorter and shorter. People are living with chronic illness longer and longer. So I'm a little bit on a tangent here, but I think until we fix the whole healthcare system, the best we can do right now is try and get the word out in our field that happy students, happy patients will learn more. And so regardless of the goals you're working on, you have to target well-being and happiness and connection if you want progress. I have taken on students that had made no meaningful progress in years in their sort of traditional clinic-based, school-based ABA programs. By the time their parents got to me, they were just looking for one goal. Can you just make them happy? We've sort of accepted that they're not going to learn to read or write. We've accepted that they're not going to be able to play team sports. We've accepted all these things. Can you help them find happiness? And what happens when those students find happiness, which takes about 3 to 6 months. If I really just dig in with a team on one goal of like, let's figure this kid out, 3 to 6 months later, I can get almost any kid thriving. And guess what follows? They learn to read, they learn to write, they learn to cook, they learn to shower better. They're a member of their community. So it's like, if we would just target happiness as an end state, as a goal in and of itself, everything else gets easier.
And Patricia, I do want to get back because I mean you're the expert in a lot of the policy advocacy and being able to kind of present to people who are decision makers on where we should be going. And I think Katie just hit it, is that, you know, resilience increases, the ability and desire to learn increases, all when you're happy, which means, of course, you're going to learn more. Right. And you're going to be able to contribute and be empowered more. So how have you been talking to decision makers and helping to shape some of the policy to be able to incorporate this more into what's occurring?
Yes, I talk about it. You know, we think about kind of, we are driven by laws and documentation. So if you think about the IEP or the ISP or the service plan that we're using, is how do we mandate a well-being measure into the work that we're doing? Because Katie likes to say, you know, we do what we measure. And so if we're measuring it, people will want it to increase. And we see this certainly in some general education settings where we've got, you know, these overall well-being measures that districts are looking at, or, you know, depression and anxiety measures that we're looking at and trying to improve, and those things. So I would love to see an overall like well-being assessment in the same way we think about literacy and all of those other things. How do we mandate, you know, when you sit down in an education program meeting, you have to consider assistive technology. You may not use it, but you have to consider it. So like, how do we and I watched that happen in my career in special education, where it was like, before you considered it, it wasn't even a discussion point. Now you have to consider it. I would like well-being considered in every educational planning meeting, every adult service planning meeting, all of those things. The other thing that, and Katie will champion this as well, is everybody wants to be strengths-based. Nobody really knows what that is. And what happens is it says something like, Patricia's a kind person. And by the way, she has a lot of work to do on all these other things. You get this like one sentence that is like, Katie, yep, she's really good at swimming, and brrr, you know what I mean? So it's like all this stuff. So I would like to think about having everybody have one objective, a requirement of one objective, one learning objective that is actually strengths focused. Well, and I don't mean swimming. Yeah.
I can share a story about, so there's an incredible assessment that Pause Psych uses. It's called the Values and Action Survey. viacharacter.org is the website. Anyone can take it for free. And this is the work of Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson, another brilliant researcher, who really designed essentially a companion to the DSM-4 at the time. that was a real measure of everything that can go right with the human condition. And they identified 24 universally valued character traits. Just by being human, you have some capacity for these 24 strengths: humor, bravery, social intelligence, creativity, curiosity. There's 24. And you take the assessment, and it tells you sort of which of those 24 are your signature strengths, which of those strengths flow most naturally from you. We cannot all have all 24. I am pretty low in fairness and pretty low in forgiveness, but pretty high in creativity and curiosity. So I can work around and come up with creative ways to be fair and forgive people. But so you get a rank order of those 24 strengths, and the top 5 or 6 sort of flow from you naturally. And what we often see in the strengths narrative is the kid's signature strengths coming out. Oh, Jimmy has tons of energy. Well, that's zest and enthusiasm, but we leave it at that. And so the question is, can we get every student through the VIA assessment? And they have a guide to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities access the survey. Patricia and I have worked with their organization to really think about how to make it more accessible. We have created visuals to support all of the different strengths in teaching students. And so one school that I worked with many years ago actually had every student access the VIA in any way they could, some assisted, some unassisted, learn their top 5 strengths. And to this day, 15 years later, they open every IEP meeting with the student coming in and presenting their top 5 strengths, and everyone at the table celebrating those strengths. And then they write one IEP goal, whether it's how they're going to use that child's humor, use their creativity, use whatever their love of learning, how they're going to enhance that. And they get one IEP goal related to their strengths. I'll tell you who really loves it: parents, teachers, even the sort of professionals that come in the speech OT. Strengths are posted on kids' desks. They will strength spot. They will walk right into a room when they're picking that kid up to go to their services. They will talk about their strengths in the hall. I mean, it's just such a part of this school's culture 15 years later. It's like, it just started with deciding every kid should know what's right with them and have an opportunity to present that at their IEP. And it's been super cool.
So what does that look like? I mean, so we're talking about strengths-based learning, strength-based assessment. We're talking about being able to increase happiness. It sounds like these things lead to an empowered individual. It sounds like it leads to somebody who's a little bit more self-determined and understands who they are and what they care about. Is this human flourishing? Or, I mean, how do we define human flourishing through this process? And I don't know who wants to tackle this, but is that the process to getting there?
Yeah, I mean, Katie gave it to us, right? It's those 6 elements. That's human flourishing, right? When you have the balance of those and opportunity to engage with those, and and flourishing is it's not. We are not always going to be flourishing, but we sure can see that the autistic community, and I want to say that widely, educators, families, siblings, autistic individuals, I think with increased focus, would have a greater opportunity and greater frequency of flourishing.
And I mean, what are the steps to get there, Katie? I mean, so we have this future. You all have done a lot of the legwork to help us get an understanding, to get a framework, to get some actionable items on how to start teaching some of this. So where are you hoping? What's the next step? Where do we go? How do we make this happen?
Say the words, Katie. Wellbeing.
Wellbeing wins. Yeah, I mean, like, if I woke up tomorrow and everyone in our community understood the sort of elements of PERMA, was talking about well-being as a goal, was sort of targeting and empowering each other, both staff and students, to achieve higher levels of well-being. Well-being is dynamic. We are all going to have good days and bad days. This is not happyology. I am not suggesting you have to be sort of giggly for the rest of your life to be flourishing. Many of us are flourishing because, I mean, I might not have the most positive emotion today, but I am getting my soul fed through meaning and purpose having this conversation, right? So well-being is dynamic. But if I woke up tomorrow and everyone in our field was asking powerful questions around thriving, that would be a huge step forward. If we were considering well-being in every conversation, that would be a step forward. If when someone proposes a new goal, or when you're onboarding a new staff into your organization, they have a 1-hour module on the elements of PERMA. This is something we're working to create with an organization in Arizona. It's like, what does the onboarding module look like so that your entire team is talking the elements of PERMA, is considering them? That's a step forward. What does it look like to give parents 3 questions to ask at their kids' IEP meeting around happiness, strengths, well-being? Step forward. So I would love to wake up tomorrow and human suffering and be erased from the planet. But since that's probably not going to happen, I think steps forward, increase awareness, let people know like well-being is a skill. It is something you can learn. It is something you can target. And oh, by the way, when you feel better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that simple. So, yeah.
Well, you've piqued my interest on the steps forward, and in order to get there is that we have to be educated. We have to find some way to be able to get the resources in order to start immersing that into whatever we're doing, or even into our daily lives. And I guess, Patricia, is where can our listeners turn to take the step forward, to know about your work, to know about the resources on this topic that are out there, and just start to continue the conversation? Because I think that's where it starts, is we have to be talking about it to make those things happen.
Absolutely. And Jeffrey, again, we really appreciate having this conversation with you. Our organization name is Proof Positive, and proofpositive.org is our website. What I would ask people to do is also, as Katie just said, make a commitment to join our alliance. Our tagline is Proof Positive, the Autism Wellbeing Alliance, because we know together we're stronger, together we're better. So on the footer of our website is a place to join the alliance. You can learn about it there. And really, we're asking people just what Katie's message just said. If tomorrow we were all addressing well-being, if tomorrow we were all talking about that. So resources, all the skills and information to learn the skills of happiness, to learn the skills of well-being are on our website. There's also an opportunity to join our alliance, an Autism Wellbeing Alliance. And really that's making a commitment for your own well-being and hopefully for the autism community at large. And we welcome people to join us in this discussion. I know that the entire autism community wants better outcomes. I want parents not to have experienced so much stress. I want educators to want to stay in the classroom long past the 5 years that is the average lifespan of an educator. And I want autistic members to be part of the human condition and have the same outcomes as everybody else. So we know that, through an alliance, we can make those a reality.
Well, you invite people. I'm going to encourage them as well. This is families, this is educators. These are, the whole litany of clinicians that are involved with somebody who's autistic, is that everybody would benefit from being able to integrate this into whatever they're doing. It's not a standalone. Everything works together, and I think that we need to realize that instead of trying to stand up my science versus somebody else's science. It's saying, hey, let's figure out where the intersection is and make it work. So I appreciate you all coming on. This is I loved the conversation, and I think this is something that I need to start talking more about as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We so appreciate you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.